Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Lights on Data show. My name is George Furican, and today we're going to be discussing how we can counter AI deepfakes with identity data. And to do so, we have Aaron Painter, who's the CEO of Nametag. I heard it's the identity verification company that stops social engineering attacks at the employee IT help desk. Welcome, Aaron.
Thanks, George. It's fantastic to be here with you today.
Likewise, I do want to learn more about Nametag, but first, I want to put the lights on deepfakes. And can you please elaborate really what they are? What does it mean, and how do they pose a threat in maybe various domains, anywhere from a company to an individual?
Yeah, it's a great question. Deepfakes as a term was one that arose roughly in 2017 from a Reddit user. And the concept that they were starting to put lights on at the time was around using technology, often synthetic media, to impersonate the likelihoodness of someone else. And in that context of those years, it was, people using, celebrities and putting them into
Mm,
illicit and improper and unique situations. And people started talking about the potential for that technology, particularly driven by new generative AI tools, to make representations of people in increasingly realistic scenarios where it would become harder and harder to tell if it was, in fact, the real person or the synthetic likelihood of that person.
Would it also account for audio only? So, for example, some people are saying they're getting phone calls that it sounds like it's from their loved ones, and in fact it's not. It's other people trying to scam them for money and things like that, but they can swear that it sounds like their husband or their mother or their kid. Would that count as a deep fake, or it has to be a visual representation?
It would. Anything that fakes our human senses is how I often think of it. So we're generally trained as humans that we can trust what we see and hear, and certainly what we feel or what we touch. In the digital realm, it's often harder to physically touch things, but we certainly what we see and hear over digital channels are ripe for impersonation. They're ripe for the use of deepfakes.
Right. So yeah, so the example that I mentioned is from an individual point of view, but of course I would assume the perpetrators would be able to use similar technology to infiltrate an organization. What are some misconceptions about deepfake detection and prevention, and how can organizations overcome them?
Yeah, let's start. There are beneficial uses for the technology in some ways, right? That have started with maybe being able to bring back the voice of a loved one who's no longer
Mm,
with us. Maybe for artistic and creative purposes, you can create new things that might be visually really interesting, or songs that might be really appealing with the voice of someone that you like. Really practical purposes. The downside is often when we're using these advanced tools also for illicit purposes or for bad purposes or to scare someone, or more often, as we see a lot, is to take over someone's account or to take over elements of their digital life or their reputation. And so you raise a really good point. Often today, a lot of the focus has been discussion around deepfake detection. And what does that mean? And how do you detect if there's a deepfake? And generally, the principles to solve deepfake detection have fallen into two camps. One, a lot of the big technology companies have tried to make efforts towards what they call watermarking content. I think of this a lot like, the early days of digital music production, where it was sort of an official stream or an official copy of the record, the album, the digital music file, from the publisher.
mhm.
It's helpful and it allows us to track back to know, was this content created in an authentic way? For example, the United States, the White House of the United States has said, hey, we want to make sure that when the White House puts out some sort of statement or video, that people can trust that it's really from us. That's a great use case where they might be able to watermark that content so people know it actually came from the White House. That's helpful. But if you're a bad actor, you might look for opportunities to use creation tools that simply don't do watermarking, that don't allow watermarking, and put that out there as equally advanced, but without the watermark. So
Mhm.
watermarking is one approach sort of at detection. Another, and really what you see a lot of companies chasing today, is this concept of detectors to say, is this real? Is this voice print a real one? Is this photo or video something real?
Mhm.
And the challenge is that they're using AI almost exclusively to beat the AI. And so it's this AI arms race, AI
Mhm.
versus AI. Can our models of detection beat the models of creation? And like any race, you're going to have some people ahead and some people behind, and that's going to change throughout time. There'll be a period where the bad actors are slightly ahead, where the good actors are slightly ahead, but it's not consistent. And so one of the philosophies I think a lot about is, how do we move from a world of deepfake detection to actually deepfake prevention, such that we're not even having to have the conversation of was it watermarked, or am I winning the AI arms race?
Yeah. So how do we do that?
One of the things I think about are other tools that we've been able to create through the history of technology and applying them in sort of a coordinated way. Mobile technology is a great example. There are so many advanced features on our mobile phones that allow us to do whole new things and open up whole new scenarios. Alongside that are things like encryption. And we all rely on encryption for so many transactions, so much of what we do in our digital lives. But the concept of cryptography is incredibly unique in this scenario.
Hmm.
Biometrics, another really fascinating one. Now, biometrics are something you can replicate a voice print, and people say, "Oh, biometrics are no longer safe," and that's true. Like any other individual element, like AI and other things, they might no longer on their own be sufficient. But when you take things like biometrics, the ability to compare a face to an earlier face, when you combine it with AI technology, with cryptography, with mobile technologies, and you sort of get this arsenal of things that frankly start to become more uniquely human, because we as humans have so many other things that we can pull on. We're not a single data feed. We have different senses. We have different ways to extrapolate or interpret information. And so I think of it in a similar way. The way to defeat something that is singularly artificial is to apply as many other tools as we can to sort of the arsenal of the fight. And in our world, we think of that a lot as mobile technology leading the way.
So what about that identity portion of it, the identity data?
Well, let's talk about how you use deepfake for maybe an identity attack. Right? There's one that's gotten a lot of notoriety recently. It was a case of someone, a finance controller in Hong Kong in a multinational company, and the CFO, as we know them, let's say in London. And the CFO reached out to the finance controller in Hong Kong and said, "I need you to make a bunch of wire transfers."
Hmm.
Controller says, "A little bit unusual. I'm a little bit suspicious." Maybe rightly so. The CFO then said, "Hey, you know what? A bunch of us from the leadership team, I'm oversimplifying here, but a bunch of us from the leadership team are on a video call. Why don't you join? Here's the link, join the call." So the controller, who was suspicious, joined this call and then saw on the video call different boxes of people that they recognized in the company. They knew, "Oh, I recognize the person. I know their voice. Oh, that person's in kind of a leadership role. This sort of must be legitimate."
Hmm.
So the controller got the approvals that they were looking for on that video call environment.
Wow.
Turns out that video call were a series of deepfake emulators where people were deploying deepfake technologies into the video call. So it looked and sounded like someone, but each of those were deepfakes being used in real time to
That's
trick.
incredible.
Totally incredible, because our digital world relies on, again, our senses of what can we see and what can we hear. We learned during the pandemic our only way to sort of get to know many people or to build trust or have professional relationships was through these kinds of channels. And so suddenly you did what you thought was right. You said, "Let's jump on a video call," and you could no longer trust what you were seeing.
Hmm.
That's the principle of a deepfake being used bad. Now, when you dissect that, you think about the ways that a deepfake are used. There are two leading ways they're used. One is what's called an injection attack. And this means you do exactly what you would do in that call, which is like when you hop on any video call, the platforms very kindly give you the choice of selecting your video feed, maybe your microphone feed, maybe you want to use this camera, maybe you want to use an external microphone. It's built to have that flexibility, which is great. Unfortunately, it also makes it very easy to select your camera feed as being a separate piece of software that is a deepfake emulator. And so in that example, you would see how someone could very easily select a deepfake emulator and use that as the video feed into the video call. Used in an identity verification flow, largely the same concept happens. Someone is able to inject a malicious deepfake image, let's say a video of a person that they've
Hmm.
created, or even something as simple as, a PDF file. You can't quite go to GPT, but you can go to others and say, "Here's my photo, make me a California driver's license that says this name, save as PDF." And
Yeah.
in frankly, most identity verification flows, there's an upload button, and you literally can upload the fake PDF that you just created. That's also use of a deepfake, although slightly less sophisticated. The other option is often what's called a presentation attack. And that's when you present sort of falsified or doctored information to the cameras or to the sensors. You might think of this as, let's say I'm going to put a mask on and I'm going to take a photo on my webcam, but I'm going to be wearing a mask. I'm not injecting a false feed, but I'm literally trying to trick the physical camera. And that's another common way that people try and deploy deep fakes and hold up a video, for example, into another camera or something along those lines.
Hmm.
Those are the common ways that they
Hmm.
happen, at least.
From this last example, are you saying that with available technology nowadays, maybe not to me, but I can hold, let's say, like a little piece of cardboard paper that's what it is in real life, but through my emulator, the other person on the other end could actually see an ID, for example.
Potentially, I don't know the exact deepfake tool that does exactly that, but yeah, that's sort of the concept.
Right. Right.
If you've seen some fun videos of them, it's often a person looks whatever they look like, and then they're trying to be someone else, and the emulation moves as they move their head, and as you speak, the voice translates to be the
Hmm.
language or the voice of the person you're trying to impersonate. That's kind of how a deepfake emulator tool works today, and they're
Hmm.
getting really good. I mean, they're getting wildly sophisticated. Which is why I think this sort of arms race of, well, my deepfake detector can detect your really good fake video. I think that's a very hard race to win.
Okay, so now you and I are talking, and well, it's clear to me that you are not a deepfake. But maybe in 5 years from now, it would be harder for me to tell, harder for a company to tell. So one would need to identify your identity as the real person behind the camera and behind the feed. So how do you envision that working even now with the identity data, and how do you envision that countering the AI deepfakes?
Yeah, this comes back to what I spend my days doing, and our kind of awesome team of engineers and products folks and others is we've invented a way to do that identity verification flow, a flow which you've probably done before. It's scan an ID and take a selfie. It's a pretty
Hmm.
consistent end
Hmm.
user flow. But today, when you've done it, if you haven't used Nametag, 100% of the chance you have done it in a web browser based environment. You might have even done it on your phone, but it's actually in a browser based environment
True.
because the typical solutions were built for regulatory compliance. They were built for sort of like checkbox. We've plausibly checked someone's ID. Seems good to me. I rented a scooter the other day. I'll be very candid with you. My account name is actually not my real name. I have a fake name in my scooter rental account. It didn't even get it. Didn't even get
Yeah.
that the ID that I showed them to rent the scooter wasn't the name I was using. Right.
Hmm.
It's regulatory compliant. Check the box. The opposite we found is by using the mobile phone. And so Nametag exists today 100% as a mobile experience. You can initiate it from a desktop or a web browser, but it launches something in your mobile environment. And by being on a mobile phone, we're able to use all these combined technologies to defeat things like deepfakes. Because a mobile app speaks into the secure enclave or the encrypted environment of a mobile phone, cryptography is involved in preventing you from injecting a
Hmm.
fake feed. When you're
Hmm.
thinking about things like, am I wearing a mask? Well, we get to use the 3D depth map camera, for example, on a modern phone to say, is this person three-dimensional? Are they human? Are they holding up
Hmm.
a picture of another picture? Or are they trying to take a picture of a screen? We get to use all the advanced telemetry data and kind of sensors and equipped in the modern phones to have a much stronger arsenal when we're doing an identity verification flow. And so that's the fundamental core of our technology. And then we try to apply that in different use cases that are valuable to people. One of the most common becomes when you're unlocking an account. Typically, people today get locked out of their account, typically when they add things like multi-factor authentication. When you get locked out of your account, you have to call the help desk. And
Hmm.
because there's no other way to actually self-service release yourself or
Right.
unlock your account.
Right.
Call the help desk. Help desk doesn't know who you are. They have to default to security questions. And that becomes this big risk of social engineering. It becomes a risk where somebody could be using maybe a fake voice and a deep fake to trick that service rep. Then they unlock the account, and then the bad actor has access to a network and can totally wreak havoc. And so we really have focused in on using our identity verification technology in this ability to protect accounts, particularly at those high risk moments.
Benjamin here listening in, he's mentioning the NSA already has the technology, plausible deniability. Thanks, Benjamin. So you've shared really good example on how an AI deepfake can cause havoc. What about the other way around?
You mean for good?
For good, yes.
Doing things for good. Yeah, I think it's actually a great topic, and it's funny. I spend so much of my day seeing the bad examples, and frankly, we're in an epidemic right now of bad actors using this for bad. Like, it is wild, and mainly because there haven't been many defenses, and so most companies are just sort of sitting there waiting to be attacked. It's very, very real today as
Hmm.
a problem. It's
Hmm.
not underestimated. However, I try to think about, all right, guys, like your question, what are the good use cases? Gosh, there must be some positive scenarios for this stuff. And I think there are some really fun ones. One of the most intriguing ones I've seen probably in the last week or so has been Reid Hoffman's creation of an AI Reid Hoffman, right? Where Reid used exactly the same tools. He used GPT and trained it on a bunch of his content and writing and books. So it sort of understood the context of him, then used a deepfake emulator to look and sound like Reid Hoffman. And he's created this environment where he can actually sit and chat with, and he's done some video recordings. I think he did one on TV again recently in the last couple of days of him discussing and interviewing the fake, the AI generated Reid Hoffman, and then vice versa.
Hmm.
And then recently, the TV interviewer was also just interviewing the artificial version of Reid. And it was interesting. I think for him, it gave us different contexts on our own work. Maybe you see things in perspectives you don't. Oh yeah, I forgot. I wrote about this years ago. And the way that the AI formulates what his forward-looking opinions might be different than how human Reid does them. Like
Right.
that to me is a fascinating example of
It is.
bringing yourself to life. Like in the world of having an AI companion, eventually, we all want eventually with this world of generative AI to become more personalized in privacy-centric ways, of course, and in secure ways. But AI generally, rewrite this thing for me. It's not that helpful if they're not going to write like you, right? Or book me this hotel. Well, you don't know where I like to go or where I like to
Right.
stay or what. So you wanted to know a bit more about you and to become more personal. And over time, we'll have personal AI agents. So when you see things like what Reid was demonstrating as this path towards a personal AI agent, it doesn't mean it should pretend to be us illicitly, but you want it to be able to make decisions or make advice or offer thoughts and comments, kind of like you would. And so this path of generative AI doing things like that, I think is actually very positive. It allows us maybe to scale, to be more efficient, to be more productive, um, and hopefully other ways kind of interesting, maybe to live on. Right, it sort of keeps the legacy of a
Hmm.
person
Hmm.
in this really neat way that is good and bad, and we have to think about if we're ready for as a society. But gosh, it might be interesting to be able to have a dialogue or have a chat with someone that was maybe in your life once and is no longer, and might not be exactly how they'd answer, but it might make you feel kind of like they're still there and keep their memories alive.
I agree. I love how you're seeing the future, at least on this side, on the positive side. I think it's very promising and definitely put a smile on my face. But until we get there, and meanwhile, and also at the same time in parallel, we need to watch out for the other side, right? The deepfakes that might be causing harms. So, from a company perspective, what challenges do you see that these companies would face when implementing identity data based solutions for countering these deepfakes?
Yeah, there are two today. I mean, my biggest advice for a company is go do we call in security world a penetration test. Like go
Hmm.
challenge yourself. I was meeting
Hmm.
with the chief security officer the other day of a large financial services firm. He said, I implemented MFA a few years ago and for our customer accounts. And I was really glad I did. I said, yeah, but how many people are getting locked out? Like, how much pressure has that been in your support team? And he's like, oh, it's been astronomical. Like the hitting cost of what I implemented when I put on more security, I didn't realize at the time. He said, but don't worry. I said, I'm aware of social engineering. He said, so I'm going to do a penetration test of my own help desk. He said, I'm a step ahead. He said, I'm going to go, have people call and try and trick my help desk reps into taking over someone's account. I said, oh, that's great. I'm so glad you're doing it. That's my top advice. And I said, have you considered asking your penetration test firm to use a deep fake in their trials? He's like, oh, I don't know. My support reps aren't trained on that. I don't know if we're ready. I don't know if we would be successful in that. And I said, yeah, but unfortunately, that's what the bad actors are using today.
Hmm.
And so I offered that illustration not for this wonderful person who's well intended and taking the right steps, but it's that I'm worried that enough companies are not taking seriously the risk of social engineering at the help desk, the
Right.
use of deep fakes in those kind of social engineering flows. And unfortunately, how I dare I say easy and for certainly mainstream in what we're seeing, the volume of attacks in the last several months of literally you just called a company help desk. It could be a customer account, it could be you as an employee, and you just say, hi, I'm this person and I'm locked out. And the way that we've architected systems and processes today are really not ready for that. And so, the best, unfortunate, it's really sad, but the most visible example has probably been MGM. And when MGM late last August had this sort of attack where a bad actor called the employee help desk, pretended to be the employee, took over an employee account, got inside the network, and then wreaked havoc. and suddenly the casino shut down. You couldn't check into your hotel room. Like, it literally brought down the company for several
Wow.
days.
Wow.
That is a very real attack. 60 Minutes has done an episode on it recently. Like, it's gotten very mainstream. But that was just one of the mainstream ones. By many reports, last Q4 alone, another 230 major companies all got hit by the exact same method. And in the last few months, it's just been it's been wild, because unfortunately companies have not found ways to shut down these attack vectors, and the bad actors are just running with it like crazy.
So you're starting the conversation with the company. Nametag comes in. Who are they first having that conversation with? Is it the CISO? Is it the data security team? Is it a combination of all IT tech?
Yeah, great question. Typically we start conversations with people focused on security, and sadly, recently a lot of them have been, I just had a breach, or I had an attempted breach, and I'm really nervous about this. And so people want to shut down the risk vector of the help desk,
Hmm.
and typically they engage. Often help desk isn't even a party to the conversation, but when they are, they typically get very excited, and they buy a tool for the help desk, which is, hey, help desk rep, when you get a call or you get a support ticket where you need to unlock an account, use a name tag verification request to make sure you know who you're speaking with. And that rolls out same day, out of the box, no pre-enrollment required, immediately gives those help desk reps a better tool. That's how most companies get started working with us. But then as you start to see it more and more in the organization, the IT team, typically under the CIO, a CIO often sees a cost savings opportunity, because most people estimate that up to half of your support desk tickets are because people are locked out. They're identity and access related. So
Hmm.
suddenly, if you're thinking, hey, I'm paying my support teams, maybe it's an outsourced support organization, for example, per ticket.
Hmm.
Gosh, I can save a lot of money if I have less tickets. And so the ability then to implement self-service MFA resets, it's a new functionality we launched only about 6 weeks ago, has been wildly popular in market because it didn't exist before. And
Right.
it has a security value proposition, but also this incredible cost savings value proposition, because like, wow, I can actually save a ton of money, right? Which I can reallocate. Imagine if my support reps could focus on higher value things or really tricky situations, or do better hand holding. Maybe if I had fewer calls to support, my support reps could be much more effective. And so the ability then to roll out kind of a self-service functionality usually involves kind of IT teams, or people that focus on identity and access management, things like that.
Thank you, Aaron. Are there any ethical considerations or privacy concerns that also organizations should be mindful of when using identity data for deepfake detection? So I would imagine if me as the customer would call in, would use this technology, and I need to, in a simple way, like you said, take a photograph of myself with the ID, and that's what I'm presenting, but could be other various techniques. Would that data get saved? So then I don't need to make the call again. Um, Things like that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We are very privacy forward as a company, and from day
Yeah.
one have tried to make those considerations primary, both for the end user and for the company. And so a company gets a lot of choice in how much data they share, or how much data they request, and how long. But one of our key principles is being explicitly transparent with the end user. So whatever that company is doing or whatever they're asking for, the end user has awareness of that, they have visibility of that, and they are explicitly consenting to share with the company this bit of data for this bit of time, and knowing how things are being used.
Right.
And so one of the common misconceptions, there's a lot of the increasing regulation around data and data privacy in many states and many countries around the world. And I would say the underlying thing that's most consistent is the requirement for explicit consent. It is that I know that my data is being used this way, maybe that my biometrics are going to be used, or that my face is going to be matched against another face, or the consent that I know what is happening in the flow and that you agree to it. For a long time, people were doing things maybe with good intentions and maybe with bad, but really not always being transparent or asking if it's okay with you. And so we've tried to build at least into our flow, and we really prioritize internally, in all of our offsites and product planning. Everything is making sort of this privacy experience and this experience of
Hmm.
consent
Hmm.
kind of paramount.
Love it. Thank you. I think transparency is key. So, Aaron, thank you so much for putting the lights on countering AI deepfakes with identity data, really showcasing to us what Nametag can do. I do encourage people to follow you on LinkedIn, and of course, check out Nametag to see how you can help your own organization in countering deepfakes, but not only any other types of attacks as well that would benefit from the help of identity data.
Thanks, George. It was really a privilege to
Thank
be here
you.
with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much, everybody.